The movie begins with a woman playing the piano while her children, David and Juliet, are fishing outside. The children are playing happily together, but this comes to an end when David playfully begins chasing Juliet. She accidentally slips and hits her head on a stone, and her body sinks to the bottom of the lake. David, without thinking twice, jumps into the lake looking for Juliet. He soon realizes that things have gone beyond his power, so he jumps out of the water and runs towards his house, screaming at the top of his lungs. Next, David wakes up from his sleep when he hears his name being whispered. He walks downstairs where he sees his sister's body laid in a coffin. He places a kiss on her forehead and takes a step back, but he experiences the shock of his life when Juliet opens her eyes. Years later, David tells the story of how he and his mother moved from England to America. After the death of his twin sister, he returned to England in 1928 as an American professor of parapsychology at Camberley University. David has a strong belief that there are no ghosts, nor are there spirits or angels. He doesn't stop at that. He joins a group where ghosts are being summoned, and he proves them wrong about the existence of ghosts, and also calls the psychic a fraud. This confuses the group as David is about to leave the room. He's surprised that the psychic knows his real name. David decides to visit Miss Webb at Sussex. After receiving several letters from her, she was seeking help because she believes she is being held as a prisoner by some evil spirits. Christina Marielle, a beautiful British girl in her early 20s, walks toward David at the railway station to take him to Miss Webb. David meets Robert, Christina's brother. He explains to David that Mrs. Webb was inspired to write to him after she read a book that he had gifted her. The Marielle siblings, Robert, Christina, and Simon all believe Miss Webb was imagining things. Though Professor David also believes this, he tries to look for something more tangible by suggesting it could be a local joke. David begins to experience weird things, but he believes it to be the handiwork of someone in the house. He, however, approaches Miss Webb for an interview. He finds out that she has been taking care of the siblings since their childhood, which brought about the name Nanny Tess. Miss Webb said that their parents had died in India. David assumes that this may be the cause of Miss Webb's delusion. With each passing day, David and Christina become closer, but Robert seems to be against the relationship between the two. Also, the relationship between the two siblings, Robert and Christina, is very suspicious. David invites a doctor, Dr. Doyle, as he suspects Miss Webb might have mental issues. The doctor diagnoses Miss Webb with having emotional trauma. David decides to leave the next day after Robert expresses his dissatisfaction with him. Christina, wanting David's last day in the palatial Edbrook house to be the best, takes him far away from her spying brothers. During this short period, the two open up to one another. Christina narrates the story of how her mother had died a day before her 14th birthday, which was on Valentine's Day. She also explains how Miss Webb ever since has found it hard to accept the death of Christina's mother, Mrs. Marielle, believing she comes back every night. Mrs. Marielle had in fact not died in India, but had drowned in their home. David, after an adventurous day, carries out a scientific experiment in search for ghosts and finds something quite surprising. The wind begins to blow heavily and turns into a tornado. It pushes David into the lake close to Edbrook, but he is saved by two of the siblings. David still doesn't believe it was any ghost, but a prank from someone in the house. When he settles to sleep, he's disturbed by Miss Webb, who for the first time seems to be talking coherently. Though she speaks hurriedly, she begs David to take her along with him as he is her only salvation, but she is immediately pulled out of the room by an invisible force. David, who is shocked by all this, runs to the door, but it refuses to open. Not wasting much time, he breaks the door and runs to Miss Webb's room, where he finds her sleeping. He walks back to his room in a confused state. The next morning, David makes a change of plan and decides not to leave. He explores the house to find any information which could solve the puzzling situations. David begins to find the Marielle siblings weird. David, hearing the noise in the house, goes to the basement where a small fire turns into a big one that he cannot manage. He runs out, screaming for help, and finds Christina on the way. Christina leads the way to the basement, but doesn't see any traces of fire. Neither does David. The Mariel siblings believe David is only imagining things, and Christina takes David to see Dr. Doyle for help. Dr. Doyle suggests that David's paranormal experiences are due to his childhood trauma. David seems to be better after he visits the doctor. He asks Christina to leave Edbrook with him, but she refuses, giving excuses. This doesn't stop the two from sharing a passionate kiss. He goes round the house but only sees a little girl, and he trails her to a mortuary. There he sees the names of the 3 Mariel siblings inscribed on a stone tablet. They had died in 1923. Their death was caused by a fire in Edbrook House. The little girl turns out to be Juliet, David's twin sister, and David ignores his sister and leaves with Christina in a car. An accident occurs on the way and David is safe, but Christina isn't. David runs to the house to break the death of Christina to Miss Webb, but he's surprised by her response. She apologizes for ever bringing him down to Edbrook and explains that the 3 Mariel siblings had died long ago and were now ghosts. Their mother had drowned herself after she found drunken Simon and Robert having improper and disgusting relations with Christina. The siblings appear, wearing black, and more secrets are spilled. They mention how Miss Webb had locked the siblings in a room and set the house on fire for their despicable act. The siblings kill Miss Webb, saying they no longer need her, that they had gotten a new victim to torment, which was David. David tries to escape, but he's trapped in Edbrook by the 3 siblings, together with Dr. Doyle, who is also a ghost. The building is set on fire with David trapped inside, and the 4 ghosts make a mockery of him. Juliet comes to his rescue as she walks through the fire to save him. David hugs Juliet tightly as he appreciates her for her help. The movie ends with David exiting a train where he is welcomed by his secretary, Kate. But lurking in the darkness all this while is Christina, who begins to trail them without their knowledge. That's going to wrap up this recap. We hope you've enjoyed it. If so, please click the subscribe button with notifications turned on so you don't miss a single video.